In 1905, the government of Western Australia passed the Aborigines Act. Under this new legislation, the Chief Protector of Aborigines was considered the guardian of all Aboriginal and mixed-race children under the age of 14, giving him the power to remove them from their families. This, combined with the gradual increase of the country's mixed-race population, led to the development of institutions and schools aimed at helping mixed-race children integrate into white society, whether they wanted to or not. The stories of these children, now known as the Stolen Generations, are generally heartbreaking, though some children were able to escape this abusive system. In 1931, 3 cousins, Molly, Gracie, and Daisy, were able to successfully escape from the Moore River Aboriginal settlement, navigating their way home by following the rabbit-proof fence, a pest prevention fence that bisected the entirety of Western Australia. 60 years later, Molly's daughter, Doris Pilkington, wrote Follow the Rabbit-Proof Fence, a record of her mother's journey that was later adapted into a feature-length film. But how accurate is the film to the book it was based on? Well, aside from a few additions, changes, and a bit of creative license, the events of the film play out pretty much the same way they do in the book, including such details as Molly, Daisy, and Gracie being forced from their home at the Jigalong Fence Depot in Western Australia to the Moore River Aboriginal settlement so they could receive training as domestic servants. Moore River's unappealing facilities, which included beds without sheets, overcrowded dorms with bars on the windows, a bucket in place of indoor plumbing, nearly inedible food, and a prison building called the Boob. Yes, apparently use of the word boob to mean breast was not yet common at this point, which made reading this part of the book very awkward. On a more depressing note, it's also true that in addition to being locked up, runaways from Moore River also typically have their heads shaved, which served as a form of public embarrassment, as well as a warning to other students. Molly and her cousins escaping from Moore River only a few days after their arrival, and the Aboriginal tracker that was tasked with bringing them back, though his backstory differs considerably from book to screen. The girls spending the night in a rabbit's warren, and their encounter with a pair of kindly hunters who give them a kangaroo's tail and a box of matches. The trio come across a farmhouse where the incredibly charitable inhabitants give them food and clothing before pointing them in the direction of the rabbit-proof fence. A.O. Neville, the Chief Protector of Aborigines in Western Australia, orchestrating a search for the 3 runaways, which chiefly involved paying trackers and local law enforcement to conduct searches in and around the rabbit-proof fence. Daisy, the youngest of the 3, being overcome by exhaustion and forcing her older cousins to help carry her, finally reaching the rabbit-proof fence, and the girls' welcome realization that they were gradually getting closer to home. Gracie deciding to leave the group after discovering that her mother had relocated to Wiluna, a decision which unfortunately led her to being captured by authorities and sent back to Moore River. Though, unlike in the film, Molly and Daisy were not there to witness this in person. Molly and Daisy's triumphant return to Jigalong after over 2 months of trekking through the Australian outback, and Neville's decision to forgo returning them to Moore River as his attempts to recover them had seriously decimated his department's budget. Molly's second escape from Moore River in January of 1941, and the abduction of her daughter Annabelle 3 years later, who she unfortunately never saw again. Before moving on to the next section, I want to talk a bit about the film's depiction of A.O. Neville, the Chief Protector of Aborigines, and his ideas regarding race integration. While it's never mentioned in the book, the film is right in asserting that by the 1930s, Neville had changed his stance from integration to biological absorption, as he believed that mixed-race relationships would eventually lead to the development of children who were indistinguishable from their white peers, allowing them to better integrate into white society. This obsession with skin tone even led to the development of institutions specifically for light-skinned children, something that I plan to talk more about in the next section. Many aspects of the girls' family life were altered for the film. While Molly and Daisy are changed from cousins to sisters, the girls' fathers, as well as Molly's stepfather Gally, are excluded from the film entirely, giving the incorrect impression that they abandoned their daughters. Rather than being taken by force, like in the film, the girls' families surrendered them without resistance, as they knew that any attempt to interfere would only get them arrested. However, this doesn't mean that they weren't devastated by the loss of their children, as they marked their abduction by beating and gashing themselves with rocks, a common custom for those in mourning. Behind them, those remaining in the camp found strong, sharp objects and gashed themselves and inflicted wounds to their heads and bodies as an expression of their sorrow. The girls' journey to Moore River was understandably much longer in the book, as they traveled by car, train, and boat, making each leg of the journey with a different guardian. Also, while they were never imprisoned on a train, they did spend a few nights inside the cells of the Marble Bar prison, so their guardian, Constable Melrose, could get a good night's sleep. Unlike in the film, the girls never witnessed a runaway being punished in person, though they were informed by another inmate named Polly that the typical punishment for runaways included a week of confinement, getting your head shaved, being paraded around the reserve as a warning to other students, and corporal punishment. The facilities at Moore River were also a lot larger than either the film or the book indicated, as, in addition to being a school for mixed-race children, both girls and boys, Moore River was also an Aboriginal settlement, as well as a rehab center for people struggling with alcohol addiction. While there was a place called Sister Kate's that was known for accepting primarily light-skinned children, it didn't begin operations until 1933, a full 2 years after the film is said to take place. It's also important to note that Sister Kate initially intended to create a home for orphaned and neglected children, and it was actually Neville who decided to use her institution as a place to integrate light-skinned children into white society. In addition to receiving a much broader education than the inmates at Moore River, these children were encouraged to completely abandon their Aboriginal identity in favor of being white. This could be one of the reasons why many of the residents of Sister Kate's, possibly even Molly's daughter Annabelle, never returned to Aboriginal society, though the institution was, at the very least, a comfortable and loving environment, until Sister Kate's death in 1946, after which it became a hotbed of abuse and corruption. In the book, one of Molly's main motivations for leaving Moore River was her belief that she, at age 15, was too old to go to school, citing her failed engagement as proof of her status as an adult. So, reasoned Molly, if she was old enough to be a co-wife, she should be working on a station somewhere. On the other hand, Daisy's arranged marriage, which in the film was one of the main motivations for sending her to Moore River, is never mentioned. Mutu, the sympathetic tracker who's tasked with hunting down the girls, is essentially a film addition. While there was an Aboriginal tracker who was employed to catch runaways, the book barely mentions him, let alone that he had a daughter who was an inmate at Moore River. While it's true that the rabbit-proof fence is actually 3 separate fences connected together, unlike in the film, the girls were able to find the correct fence and follow it home without any issues. The scene where Molly and her cousins are taken in by a previous resident of Moore River is a film addition, though the abuse that this young woman was subjected to by her employer reflects the experiences of many mixed-race children, both before and after their graduation. In fact, the first member of the stolen generations to receive compensation from the government was a woman named Valerie Lino, who had been similarly abused by her employer. Unlike in the film, Gracie actually succeeded in traveling to Balluna, but was unable to locate her mother before she was captured and returned to Moore River. Rather than arriving at Jigalong on foot, like in the film, Molly and Daisy first made their way to Station 594, where, at the request of Molly's aunt, they were given a camel by the station's manager, allowing them to make the last leg of their journey in relative comfort. Unfortunately, the girls' escape did little to change the government's views regarding mixed-race children, as the forced removal of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children continued until the 1970s. While the Australian government has made steps towards reconciling with these stolen generations, even issuing a public apology in 2008, discrimination remains an enduring issue for many of Australia's First People, which is actually incredibly depressing. If you're interested in watching some of my more upbeat videos, then please check out the Movie vs. History playlist. While those looking to learn more about these stolen generations should check out the Bring Them Home report, a 1997 study that exposed the horrors of the stolen generation to the public. As always, I'm Silver Jade, asking you to please remember to support your local library, and I hope to see you all next time.